This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We are back with Jeff Bednar, who is the founder of Profound Foods. Jeff, I'm excited to have you back on the program. I learned so much about the agriculture industry in speaking to you. So much about you as well. Learning that you had an allergy to bees, and then learning about your health journey, which got you into the farming industry. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud to have you back. That was probably one of the most delightful discussions I've had in a while about agriculture. So it's good to have you here.
Very cool. Thanks for having me.
So you are a small farmer. If you can, give us the quick overview to our listener of your business. So you purchased 2.6 acres to get you started in North Texas in the farming industry. And you got into farming out of a need to understand food and to change your diet because of a health issue when you were 36, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And so your journey has been fascinating. Then as you get into the program, you're a few years into the program, then COVID happens. And you had to pivot your business again. You went to home delivery.
Actually, before COVID happened, we started our farm and started growing. And one of the things that I found is, farming's very expensive.
Right.
And so the expensive parts are delivering, having a refrigerated van, marketing, all of those pieces. And at some point, I found that other farm buddies of mine, farmers and ranchers, had the same problem. That's where we kind of developed this idea of farmers helping farmers working together.
Interesting.
So we started our food hub in 2018. And that's where that grant comes into play that I was telling you about earlier. But when we started our food hub, it was my farm growing greens, a friend that had chickens and eggs, another friend that grew okra over in Princeton, and a gentleman that was making goat cheese from his goats. Right. And so we all had kind of different products, and we were all wanting to work in the restaurant space. And so we kind of just teamed up together. Got the refrigerated vans and created a one-stop shop for chefs and restaurants to be able to place their order from a bunch of farms at the same time and get the delivery instead of all 5 of us driving into Dallas.
Right.
It was one driving into Dallas, loading the eggs, the chicken,
So you created a collaborative of sorts. That's
absolutely
amazing. A lot of people, the name Nabisco.
Yeah.
And back, it was the National Biscuit Company. Is how Nabisco came with that Nabisco name. And if I remember correctly, it was kind of the same thing. A bunch of bakeries that got together and decided to let's partner versus be competitors.
Right.
And that's an interesting idea. I speak so much about organizations partnering, bartering. I think is still important to do. So if you have one product and I have another, let's exchange versus exchanging only in cash.
Yep.
It's a great way to help scale a business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Love trades. Absolutely.
So not to discuss your personal finances, but you mentioned that it's very expensive. How can someone get in and afford the cost? Are there banks that they can go to or only the grants that they have as an option? How does someone get into farming and afford to get into that business?
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit andycostafilms.com/podcast and turn your content into leads.
The age-old saying is start with a lot of money and end with less. But there's a lot of different ways to finance a farm, and it kind of depends on what kind of farm, because every farm is different. I've never been on 2 identical farms, right? Everything's completely different. So it's a lot about the scale. Do you want to have a garden outside? Or a high-tech, $50 million greenhouse.
Right.
So there's, personal finances. There is some grant opportunities around, which are a little bit, there's less of them right now with the current administration than there was. And then there is some bank financing. There's land banks to get farmland for farmers.
Interesting.
There's, it really would depend on your style of farm.
Now, can you tell us more about land banking? And here's why I ask. I attended a meeting some years ago on the affordable housing piece, and they were getting into land banking. Over 15 years ago, I worked for a home builder, a national home builder, and we land banked a lot. Just because it allowed us to have the asset in a different format, legal format than otherwise. But how does land banking work in farming? It's interesting. I've not heard a lot of people discuss land banking in farming.
Yeah. So one of the things that is a lot of the land banks that are around are nonprofits or co-ops. And so you can actually get a check back if, at the end of the year kind of thing.
Okay.
One thing I found is that we weren't able to use a land bank because my farm is located in Lucas, which is basically a suburb of Dallas.
Right.
And you have to be rural in order to get land bank money. And then I believe they have like a 5-acre minimum.
Okay.
And so when we started the farm, it was only 2.6 acres.
Right.
We ended up growing and now we have about 10 acres. But that was one of the difficulties with land banks is that there is some geographical restrictions of having to be rural land.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, when you're looking for your property to purchase the initial 2.6 acres and then grow it, and you're so well educated on the whole farming piece, how much education was required to understand like the soil and the environmental conditions and the weather conditions of your target area? Because it varies all over the country.
I killed a lot of plants. Like I mentioned in the last episode is that, it took me 3 years in order to reliably be able to grow.
Right.
And, became a master gardener. I did permaculture class, school. And then just visiting a lot of these farms around, there was a lot of dead plants.
Right.
For the first 3 years before I had employees, I would, grow some beautiful things, and then we would get bugs, and I didn't know how to deal with them, and then we would lose everything at once.
Okay.
And then as soon as I had employees, they need to be paid, and so then it was like we need to be more consistent. We can't just keep going from feast to famine on the farm, and so that's where we really had to dig into learning the, pest control practices, learn how to have, keep our soil healthy, keep our hydroponic water systems healthy.
Right.
We'd send off water samples once a month to a lab in Florida, so they would analyze all of our water and tell us exactly what we needed to add more iron or, those kind of things. Worked exclusively or extensively with Texas A&M.
Okay.
And AgriLife Service.
So I was going to ask you about Texas A&M.
So
great agriculture program.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I found worked really well for me is in my travels around the country, going to all these different farms, I met some of the people that are the best in the industry. So if I had a pest problem, I can call a doctor at Arizona State.
Right.
I can call my buddy who manages a $600 million greenhouse in California and say, hey, how would you solve this problem?
Right.
And so he was able to give us good feedback. And then we've kind of learned and then trained all of our employees and interns and everybody that's worked for us over the years.
That's amazing. So I attended school in Virginia. Most people don't understand the land grant school system that were established really around the agriculture and mechanical industries here in the U.S., hundreds of years ago. But Texas A&M is one of those. So they have a great program with an extension program to help people understand the different areas, such as agriculture. So it's great that you had a program. And then I remember speaking to a 4-H group back in college about the agricultural industry, and just so much to learn there. Why did you decide to add aquaponics and then later hydroponics to your operation? Well,
I knew I wanted to do something inside of a controlled environment, so greenhouses. And there's a lot of different ways you can grow. But in the beginning, why I liked aquaponics is because it was something that was marketable. I have a marketing background from when I did real estate and the other businesses. And so I was like, telling people that you've got a closed loop ecosystem where the fish provide the fertilizer for the plants, the plants clean the water for the fish, and everything flows through there. You use 90% less water than in soil farming, and your plants are going to grow quicker. It was just a great story.
Sure.
And then when we went to expand our farm after those 3 years, when we started getting clients in, one of the things that we found with aquaponics is that it takes a little bit longer, and it's still a little bit managing 2 ecosystems is harder than managing one.
Right.
So we cut the fish out of the equation and we brought in hydroponic nutrients.
Okay.
We started growing products faster, more reliably, more consistent, and that's what we needed for the restaurant business.
What was the variation between the two then? Like so you took the fish out of the equation, but what was it? Was it something in the water? Like how does...
Well, in hydroponics, you're adding the nutrients.
Right.
And so you can actually measure and get the exact nutrients that the plants need. So
the fish may not have been consistently producing enough the nutrients.
So if it gets cold, fish eat less, which means they poop less, which is your fertilizer. And so in the wintertime, everything would slow way down. And then with hydroponics, we could just add a little bit more iron, add a little, the nutrients.
Now, how did that change your costs and expenses? Are you having to buy more product than the nutrients?
The costs went dramatically down.
Oh, did it?
Right. So in the aquaponics system, you get to harvest fish. So we were raising tilapia. We could actually harvest tilapia and eat them, which was great.
Right.
But you can't legally sell them in Texas. There's some laws saying you can't directly sell fish from a farm like what we had.
Interesting.
And so without that income from being able to sell the fish, the aquaponics was actually less financially viable.
Okay.
And with hydroponics, we're spending a couple $100 a month in nutrients versus we were spending easily a couple $100 in fish feed.
Okay.
And so you're getting a product faster, more consistent, and more controllable.
That is interesting because you're right on the front end. You've got to have a fish feed.
Right.
And then the expense of the fish itself. Interesting.
Yeah.
So not to get into the policy, but I was going to ask you about fish farming because that's not unusual to have farms that raise fish for food consumption.
Yeah.
What's different about your process that wouldn't allow you to sell the fish?
It's been years since I've looked into it. Probably like 10 years ago is when we kind of started switching over.
Right.
But at that time, you had to sell fish through a distributor.
Okay.
And so the distributor would offer you $1 a pound, but it took you $3 a pound to grow it.
Gotcha.
And so then it just wasn't financially viable. But we got to eat a lot of really good tilapia, and it was better than any tilapia that you've ever had that's coming out of Southeast Asia or Costa Rica, from fish farms. So, we did a once a year big harvest and got hundreds of pounds of fish out.
Right. Now, with it being a small farm, how does the volume factor into your ability to produce successful revenue?
Yeah. So one of the things that we found in the beginning of starting our farm is that we were working on building a brand.
Okay.
And I was focusing on brand building more than revenue generation.
Right.
Which, if I had to go back and talk to my younger self, I'd be like, focus on the money a little bit,
Sure.
But when we're doing that, as a small farm, that's one of the reasons why we had to have the food hub. So we had diversification on customers. So we could bring other products in, and that helped make the farm viable because we were generating revenue from other, from all the farmers working together.
Right.
So, as a small farm, it is difficult to generate enough revenue to, sustain and, take care of your family and stuff like that. We wouldn't have been able to do it without the off-farm income from my wife.
So that's an interesting point as well. And I want to mention that point before we go back to where you are today with the farm and kind of the next steps and stages and where you are. But a lot of entrepreneurs have that same challenge, and it's been helpful for them to have a spouse or maybe a supportive family, parents, et cetera. They can live at home, save on the cost of housing to fund the initial startup of their business. So it's neat that and I think you mentioned this in the first episode, neat that you had a spouse to rely on to help get this idea and concept launched.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what's next for the farm then? I know that you're still evolving. You've been in business now for a little over 10 years.
Yeah.
You've had a huge impact on the local community, agriculture community for the farmers. What's next for you?
Yeah, so we recently made a decision to actually close our greenhouse operations after almost 11 years.
Wow.
And it was a hard decision. And one of the things that we were looking at is, going into this summer, knowing it's going to be a brutal summer, was we needed to fill up all of the greenhouses and then do some major repairs. So some of the greenhouses were 20 years old.
Okay.
And so we're looking at having to spend a couple $100,000 in infrastructure to get the farm up to where it needed to be. And it was just kind of like, well, this is going to be a hard summer for a lot of restaurants. The restaurant business is coming down a little bit with people spending less money and inflation and all of these things. So it just didn't make sense to invest more money in that when we could focus in on the hub, and we have commercial kitchens and we host events and, working on spending a little bit more time on advocacy work for, small farmers and ranchers.
Sure.
So that's been a pretty big change for us.
And that's a huge change, especially when you have something that you're so passionate about. But I think there's a lesson there for other business leaders listening in is how do you make some of these transitions to keep the business going, but you've got to make a change. And I used to have this dialogue with, again, business owners is if you have to spend hundreds of $1,000s in upgrading and you don't know if it makes sense, if you get a return on that investment, what do you do? Like, do you close down that division, that operation? Big companies do it all the time. If they have an underperforming business unit, they'll sell it or close it down and then focus on the well-performing portions of the business. So it sounds like you had that decision to make.
Yeah, I talked to I have business mentor friends. And so I kind of was just pinging all of these people I respect that have built big businesses. And, the short version is do more of what's working and less of what's not.
Right.
And the farm was the source of most of my headaches. Every time it would get rainy and windy, we had some, couple tens of thousands of dollars in wind damage in March this year.
Right.
And, when we took out all of those variable pieces of farming, then we can really focus on making an even greater impact in our community with all of the other things that Profound does.
Right. Well, you have wind, and I forgot to mention, we were talking earlier, you also have hail here in Texas that can come completely out of the blue.
Yep. 2 years ago, $100,000 in hail damage to the greenhouses.
Wow.
There's plastic roofs, plastic walls.
Now, how, and you mentioned something earlier that made me think about it, and I didn't ask the question as a follow-up, but what does insurance look like for a farm? I can only imagine. That's what I can.
Yeah, I spent $70,000 on insurance last year.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the greenhouses have a $10,000 deductible per greenhouse.
Okay.
So if it hails out, it's $10,000 per greenhouse.
Wow.
And, it's a couple $1,000s a month to insure them. And it's just one of those, the insurance is one of the biggest expenses that I had is running in the farm and in the food hub, because we've got a fleet of delivery vehicles that are out on the road, and we manufacture food in my commercial kitchens.
Oh, wow.
And so all of that stuff there's a lot of liability there and a lot of risk. So you got to have insurance. You can't do it without, but it's so expensive to insure, and it's not getting cheaper.
And so I look at some of the other businesses, and I'm sure there are a lot of businesses with lesser insurance hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it makes, if you had to decide between going into software development and farming, you've got gasoline and the bugs and insurance costs that are huge. So very interesting. So
but you get the lifestyle,
you do.
Which is why people get into farming. And that's the big thing of being on your property with your animals or your plants and your family. And that's worth, for the farmers I know, that's worth the trade-off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about why you have business mentor friends and the value in having those business mentor friends? A lot of people might have coaches or mentors, but I think some of the younger, maybe newer leaders might feel that they already know everything.
Yeah.
And they're resistant to the idea of someone else telling them in their mind what they should do. But how did you get to have business mentor friends, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so my mom is actually a business coach, and so she's worked with Fortune 10 companies. This is her whole business. She just wrote her second book about mentoring, and
I want your mom on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Andrea Bednar, and I think it's andreabednar.com. But so growing up my whole life, watching my mom coach all of these amazing people and doing big things, and then having the money to go build schools in Africa and Asia and, all of that kind of thing really made a difference for me. So I think I hired my first business coach in 2014. And this guy had done multiple software companies and, hundreds of millions of dollars and exited 3 or 4 times. And so I, in the coaching in the beginning, I said, hey, I'm going to start a farm. And he said, man, you need to learn about business minimum viable product, and just started giving me all these terms that I dove in deep on YouTube and started reading a bunch of or listening to audiobooks.
Nice.
And ever since then, I've kind of just got this great, amazing community of business owners.
Right.
And so when I'm going to make a big decision for the company, whether it's launching retail or changing something or closing our farm, I'll go out and I'll just basically tell everybody everything, and then I'll kind of pick and choose their comments back.
Very good.
And that was pretty much all of them kind of aligned with, hey, if the farm thing isn't going to get there, then cut it now, and then you can focus on bigger things.
Right. And you're right. Learning how to cut your losses early in business is so critical.
Yeah, it took me 11 years, but that's all right.
I used to, I've been coaching a lot of people in my career, and I give them the example. If you're spending $80 million on a new project and you get $20 million into it, and you realize that what you thought would work isn't quite going to work that way, you've got to pivot. And then you've got to save. So some people get in and they think, I've already spent $20 million. I have $20 million in it. I need to spend the rest of the 40, however much it is remaining. And that's just not the right approach. Let's figure out how to make that change. The $20 million is spent.
Yeah.
Like how do I pivot and make sure that the rest of the money I might spend is used right?
Yeah.
So
I'll say one of the things I'm most excited about right now, because we've closed our farm and we've sold our food hub. The company that's taking it on, Rehoboth and Dogwood Markets, is actually going to put some resources behind expanding, because the farm wasn't really making any money. We kept taking money from the hub and spending it on keeping the farm alive. Now we're going to be able to greatly expand our delivery area, the number of farms, the variety of products, and serve a whole lot more people in the community. And so I'm pretty excited about the future and partnering with Rehoboth and Dogwood Markets.
That is fantastic. How did that come about? How did you find and connect with them?
Yeah, so it's a company that owns a couple of meat processors.
Okay.
And so they bring, farmers or ranchers bring their products in, they process the meat. They've got a retail store in Detroit, Texas.
Right.
And then they also have a little restaurant there. And then they wanted to expand their verticals, so they bought a ranch.
Okay.
And so now they're raising their own pasture-raised pork and pastured beef, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And so this was kind of the next part of their evolution, is that they wanted to get all the way to the end customer. So we met them a couple of years ago when we started distributing their pork products. And I eat it at least once a week. They got the best chops. That's how we built the relationship. And when I kind of told them we were making some changes and pivots within our company, and that I was going to focus more personally on our event space and our commissary kitchens, they were, what are you going to do with the hub?
Right.
And so we worked out just a great structure, a great deal. I'm still on board for a period of time, kind of helping in the transition. They kept on all of our staff. They got our delivery vans. The only thing that they didn't really get is the name Profound, because I'm not done with it yet.
So what are you going to do with the name Profound? Have you mapped that out?
It's going to be, part of it is the event space and really curating a community and bringing the community together while enjoying good food and drinks.
Right.
And so we hosted a Meet the Farmer event on Monday this week, had 180 people show up. There's probably 30 farms and ranches that came, and just network social. We ate some really good locally sourced food and, classes, training, commercial kitchens. We'll be in the food space. It's just going to look a little bit different than what we were doing before.
So your wife's culinary skills, has she become more involved in cooking and preparing food? And she seems really magnificent.
Right now, she is really into bread. So she bakes sourdough every single week. And we actually just a month or two ago, we auctioned off a couple of her sourdough loaves for charity. They sold for $200 a loaf.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, we were able to share the money with a nonprofit.
And you didn't bring any with you?
Yeah, I totally should have. Yeah. She did a banana cranberry bread this week, and so I've been eating on that all week. Yeah.
So is she dedicated to this full time now, or is she still
I wish.
Well?
No. So she's still got a corporate job, and that's, like I said, covers the 401k and all of that kind of thing.
Makes sense. I know for a lot of people, one spouse will work not only just to bring the income, but they also have the benefits and medical benefits on that side of the.
Like, I got to be insured now, so it's is what it is.
No, that makes sense. So, but she sounds like a delight. It sounds like the next ship in Joanna Gaines when it comes to building this ecosystem around food farming concept.
Yeah, absolutely. She, since we closed the greenhouses, we kept all of our raised bed gardens and stuff. So now we don't have staff to go ask to do weeding or watering. So she's been spending a lot more time out in the gardens lately. And she's a different person when she gets to spend time in the gardens versus when she's stuck on Zoom meetings all day.
It's therapeutic, isn't it?
100%.
Just being out there with nature.
Yep. And there's science behind putting your hands in the soil and breathing the fresh air too.
Right. So the Fairview Event Center is your event center.
Yep.
Tell us about the event center, kind of your vision for it. It's a good sized center. I think it's broken up in small quarters.
Yep.
But what's your vision as a part of the Profound Food evolution for this event center?
Yeah, so we've been in it for 4 years or so. It's 14,000 square feet, and we have this beautiful, huge demonstration kitchen.
Yeah.
So the lady who manages my commercial kitchens owns her own company called the Jelly Queens.
Okay.
And she has 42 world awards for her jams and jellies. So she teaches jam making classes, and she hosts tea parties once a month. And so she'll, biscuits and all kinds of, fancy teas. We host, weddings and bridal showers, corporate events, cooking classes. Sure. We did a whole hog butchery class recently where we taught people how to break down a hog from, and process it themselves.
Okay.
That was a really fun one. And then, we've just got this commercial kitchen in the back that we have different folks that come in and make all kinds of value-added goods between the jams and jellies and pickles and drinks and chocolates and things like that.
So I think it was Williams-Sonoma, one of the places that I took my daughters for a cooking class. It may have been a different retail outlet, but it sounds like and those are relatively small in the stores. So it sounds like you can handle larger groups. Yeah,
larger groups. And everything that we do there, with some private events, but everything that we're hosting is about bringing the community together.
Right.
In person, let's get together, because magical things happen when you go and hang out with people.
Right. Some years ago, I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but I had a sketch of a potential business. And the idea back then, this has been at least 15 years, having what it sounds like you have a huge commercial kitchen. inside of a really big grocery store operation for the same reason that you can have entire families in there and bigger demos than some of the ones that I've seen. And I thought it would be just a good community space. So it sounds like you're doing that without the grocery store component to it, because I thought people can buy their groceries, they can come learn how to cook.
Yeah,
now
that's where the food hub comes in, because we actually do have the groceries, but we deliver them to your house versus a store where you come in. Yeah.
And so many people now are getting their products delivered. You know, HelloFresh, I presume, was probably a competitor, and they're getting everything with the menu mapped out. But I love experimenting with food when I cook. I am one of those trying to see what flavor can blend with which other flavor and which seasoning I can use. And so it sounds like this is just a delightful place to help people engage in cooking.
Yep. Bring people together.
Yep. So do you focus on weddings as well for the event center, or just mainly the cooking? Do you offer, are you, from a marketing perspective, are you marketing towards couples and date nights?
Yeah, we actually haven't really focused on the events there much over the years because we've been so tied up in the farming and the food hub and stuff. So right now is the time to actually get in there and start doing some marketing. In the last 11 years of all of my companies, we spent less than $2,000 on marketing. So everything that we're doing was inside of viral and word of mouth. And because we've been featured on so many different news programs and newspapers and things like that. Trying to figure out where exactly the niche is going to be. And I think it'll be a good, healthy combination between events that we're hosting and creating, whether it's, classes or symposiums, or and hosting private events. Okay. So we just had a 50th birthday party that was great last week, and we had the Meet the Farmer event. And so a lot of fun things like that will be planned.
Now, do you still have the partnerships with a lot of the people that were involved in the food hub, and you're bringing them into this part of the business?
Absolutely.
As well?
Yeah, if someone books the event space, they can bring in their own food, but I usually will say, hey, we have a caterer right here in our kitchen that knows everything and can bring stuff out to you. And
that's fantastic.
So yeah, the relationships are really part of the key thing here, is knowing who to call and what everybody does in the space, so we can all, help each other build our businesses.
Very cool. So I know we spoke about some of the pitfalls and the ups and downs, but what other advice can you give someone as an entrepreneur looking to get into the farming industry? Like, how do you help them survive based on what you've learned? What advice would you give them?
I get asked all the time for advice on exactly that. Hey, we want to start a farm. What should we grow? And that's the wrong question. The right question is, how are you going to sell the product?
Sure.
Where is it going to go? I get contacted by people that are 3 hours out in East Texas, and they want to start a 2-acre farm. The problem there is you literally cannot grow enough to make it worthwhile to drive a truck 3 hours into Dallas.
Sure.
There's probably not a farm-to-table restaurant that wants all the little things you can grow out there, because they're typically going to be in a bigger city. Okay. So understanding the market of, if you're in the city, you can have a very small farm and deliver directly, or you're going to work at farmers markets. Okay. Farmers markets sometimes are seasonal, so you don't have year-round income.
Sure.
And if it rains, you're out of luck.
Okay.
You're just you've already harvested it. It's going to be donated or thrown away. So understanding where the market is the number one thing. And then just the same advice I got, when I got started, was the minimum viable product. Okay. Can you do a raised bed and then go take that item to a chef or to a farmer's market and sell it?
Right.
And then if you can, build a bigger one.
Right. How do you build your pricing for your product? Speaking of that concept, how do you know what prices are the right place? It's not like you can go to the producer index per se, or one of those, but what do you look at?
That was a really interesting problem in the beginning, because we're growing better and different crops than you can buy in the grocery store.
Right.
So I think that it's more valuable to get something that was harvested this morning than something that was harvested 3 weeks ago in California or Mexico. And so the pricing building was pretty difficult. One of the things I did in the beginning when we were working with restaurants is I went in and I said, how much are you paying for it now? Okay. So they buy a case of lettuce for $35, let's say. Right. And in that case of lettuce, they're going to throw away 30% of it because it's all slimy and rotten because it's 2 weeks old coming out of Mexico. Sure. And so that means that I can price mine at least 30% more, plus it's a better, fresher and more flavorful. So that's kind of how we gauge the prices. Is I would take, what the organic price was, and then, be up 10 or 20% from there. And if something wasn't selling, we'd adjust the price to kind of get all the prices right. Probably the most difficult thing is how do you sell something that nobody else is selling? Okay. We were growing varieties of edible flowers and herbs that you literally cannot buy from any distributor. Okay. Or maybe you could get it from a farm if you order directly from them and they're willing to ship and see what kind of quality it's in. And so some of that's a little bit of guesswork. You just kind of got to go, well, I guess this clamshell, how long does it take to harvest it? How much nutrients it is? How long did it take to grow to get to that point? And that's how you kind of figure out the prices, the difficulty and labor spent on growing it.
Right. How did you mentioned the distributors there. In every industry, there is a supply chain. And I had a supply chain and, 4 layers potentially in some of these, maybe 5, from manufacturer to distributor to reseller and et cetera. How did the distributor play relative to you? Because so many restaurants are getting their products from distributors,
right?
And these really large distribution companies.
Yeah.
How do you compete with that element? Because you're direct to user, not through distribution. Why not distribution? And I know the answer, but why not distribution? And then how do they influence your strategy?
So when I bought the farm, we had these empty greenhouses, and I said, well, we got to figure out what we're going to grow. So I called every distributor that I could find in North Texas, all of the big names.
Right.
And literally every single phone call was no thanks. I was like, I haven't even told you what we're going to grow. And they just, no thanks, we're good.
Wow.
They didn't even want to talk to me. And it was because of the scale of our farm.
Okay.
It was just too small for them to work with. And the smaller you are, the harder it is to be consistent.
Right.
And so distributors go, we need consistent product for our customers. So they want to go with the big farms, even if it's not a good product and it's further away, because it's consistent.
Right.
And so I learned very quickly, consistency is everything.
Okay.
And that's why greenhouses help in growing. And that kind of was the first light bulb spark of we need to have a solution for small farmers, because there wasn't one.
Right.
And that's how we came up with the idea of starting the hub of like, if no one else will even talk to you as a producer, let's create our own hub and only talk to these small and medium-sized farmers and ranchers.
So that's interesting. And it just hit me that the hub became like your distribution business.
Yep.
It brought all these partners together, but it was almost like a distributor where you could collaborate.
It was full-on distribution, but it
very cool.
It's similar, runs very similar to a co-op.
Right.
But not a co-op. Yeah.
Right. Jeff, this has been incredible. Your background is amazing. The idea of you being an entrepreneur starting at 10 is so cool. And you didn't have the lemonade stand or the newspaper route like some of the other great leaders like Ross Perot had. You started in a vending machine, and then continued to have businesses through college and into your adulthood. Your real estate business. What made you get into real estate real quick?
We sold the car wash business, and I was, again, looking for what was going to be next. And while we had the car washes, I had bought my first rental property. And so I was already kind of interested in real estate. And, I started going to some real estate meetings to meet the people in the community. Right. And then over the 3 years that I was full-time in real estate, we bought and sold 100 houses.
Oh.
And so we started a financing program, an academy to teach people how to do the real estate we were doing. So we had all of these different verticals, rentals, fix and flip, wholesaling.
Really?
Yeah, we had construction crews working for us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a fun business.
All from ground up? It's not like you... Okay.
Yep, from ground
up. That is
up.
incredible. And then you sold it.
I sold it. I had I was a 49% partner, so I sold my 49% to my partner. Then, that's
fantastic. No, you're like the perfect guest on the Business Decoded, because you have so much knowledge. And what's fascinating to me is that you've taken that knowledge and used it across so many different industries to build a business, sell a business, and that's the kind of insight that I think our listeners will want to hear. Our whole goal, part of the goal in producing this program, creating the program, was to do kind of what your business mentors have done. Take people like you, and you serve as a mentor through this program to those other entrepreneurs that are out there trying to find their way.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you being willing to share all of your insight with our listener.
Yep, love being here.
Good deal. Thanks for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.